Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tea with ALSA. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by someone whose journey and voice has made a huge impact, Alice Taylor. Born and raised in the UK, Alice studied law and worked as a journalist in Malta before visiting Albania in 2017 for what was meant to be only a 3-day holiday. However, she never left. Now a proud Albanian citizen, a mother, and one of the most recognisable foreign journalists in the country, Alice has spent the last several years using her social media, reporting, and books to tell the story of Albania to the world. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you, Alice.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. So we'll go to the start. So, of course, people always dream about making big changes, but few actually do it. What was going through your mind when you realized Albania wasn't just a holiday? It was the start of a new chapter. Did you ever imagine you'd be involved in shaping the country as it's seen by the world today?
I didn't imagine that bit. That all became a bit of a surprise. And to be honest, it still is a bit of a surprise when I keep doing things and then I just sort of step back and think, this is insane. You know, I grew up on a farm in Cornwall in the UK, and here I am shouting controversial questions at Alexander Vucic and going viral on social media and publishing books. And I still have friends in the UK. They'll message me, people I went to school with, and they come across me just randomly, and they'll be like, what are you doing on Albanian TV? Or like, I found a video of the Prime Minister of Albania interviewing you. Like, how did this happen? So yeah, I do have to kind of pinch myself maybe once or twice a week to kind of, ground myself about what's happening and how this ended up. And I mean, me coming here was completely accidental in a way. I mean, I came for a holiday. The circumstances of me coming here on holiday were very random as well. Let alone the circumstances to me deciding to stay. It was all a series of events which came after each other in a very unexpected way that led to me being here. And I look I look back at the last 8 years, and I think, I'm so glad all those things happened. Some of them were very bad things that happened, and that kind of forms one of my core beliefs, which is when stuff goes wrong, yeah, it sucks at the time, but you will look back on it in years to come and say, thank God that happened, because it's shaped what happened, what followed next. So yeah, to answer your question, I mean, I can go into the details of how exactly I ended up here if you want me to, but it is sort of, several times a week I'm pinching myself and going, how did I end up here? How did I end up in this situation? How did I end up doing this? But it's great. I love it. It's Monday today. Who knows what's going to happen this week? I just don't know.
Definitely. It would be great to hear, like, what actually made you even come on holiday to Albania, because, of course, in 2017, it still wasn't known. It was still branded as unsafe. What actually made you come for a holiday?
Well, I'd been living in Malta, working as a journalist in Malta. My colleague was murdered, Daphne Caruana Galizia, and obviously that was a huge, huge shock. And I was even questioning whether I wanted to continue being a journalist. So I went to stay with a friend in Cyprus, and from there I'd planned to maybe figure out what I was going to do and travel a bit as well. And I looked on Skyscanner, and at the time they had a section for like the cheapest flights of that moment, last minute flights, and I clicked and it came up with Tirana, and I was like, okay, cool. I knew where Albania was. Obviously I remember 97 seeing some things on the news. I was quite young, but I remember it. I remember it cropping up in the news, certain other points. My mum had told me about Albania as well. She travelled through Yugoslavia and Greece during the 60s in a camper van. She was a hippie. And Albania was the only place she hadn't been able to go to. And she'd always been frustrated about that. And she told me. So I'd heard about that as well. But other than that, I didn't know anything. So I booked my flight at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had to leave I think my flight was 5 a.m. the next morning. Very early, and my alarm went off maybe 3:30, something like that, and I meant to press snooze, but I pressed cancel, and I went back to sleep, and I was awoken by someone banging on the door of my apartment. It was my taxi driver. Get up, in Greek. Get up, get out of bed, come on. And I lay there for a minute, and I was like, oh, can I be bothered, or it was a cheap flight, do I just stay in bed? And then I just put my feet on the ground, and I got dressed, I got my bag, I got in the taxi. I told him to put his foot down. The poor guy drove, breaking every speed limit possible to the airport. And we got there, and the check-in gate had just closed. Just closed. And I got there and I sort of slammed down my passport. I was like, please let me through, you know. And she looked at the other girl and they were like, okay, come on. You know, and they checked me in and I went through and I got on my plane and I got to Tirana airport about 11:30 in the morning. Didn't even know what money I was supposed to be taking out of the ATM. I went and it was like 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 lek. And I was trying to look on my phone, what is lek? But I didn't have any internet. The Wi-Fi in the airport was terrible at that time. I'm sure it's improved now. And I just sort of, 5,000, okay, that would do. I didn't even know what it was worth, you know. And I got in this taxi and the driver spoke some English and was really thrilled to be able to practice it with me. And he invited me for coffee with like his entire family and stuff. I said no. But anyway, and I got to the hotel I was staying at and I remember just driving through Tirana. I was like, this place is really cool. You know, it had this energy and this vibe about it. And I spent the next day exploring, wandering around, and I felt very safe and it was beautiful. It was interesting. People were super friendly. And then on the second day, I had a problem with my ear, like an infection, and I asked the hotel to call a doctor. The doctor came, he prescribed me antibiotics, and he said, don't fly. I was supposed to fly like a day and a half later. He was like, don't try and rebook your ticket because it can cause problems if you have a problem with your ear. I was like, okay, cool, fine, I'll rebook a few days later. And I went out for a little walk to get my prescription, and I passed a cafe in Pasari and I sat down outside, and it was terrible weather at the time. And the woman, the waitress, she didn't speak much English, but she said, come and sit inside, you know, it's nicer inside. So I went in, and there was a table next to me with two older guys on it in their 60s or 70s, perhaps. And they were very curious about this very tall, obviously foreign person sitting there drinking coffee. They didn't speak English, but we communicated, and I managed to communicate. I was from the UK and I was visiting Albania, and they were delighted with this. And they bought me a rakia, and I'd never had raki before, and I drank it. I had something to eat, and then I had another one. And the waitress was talking to me, and you know, we had fun. It was really, they were really sweet. It wasn't they were being creepy or anything. They were really kind and respectful, and it's not like they were trying to get me drunk or anything. They were just Albanian hospitality, you know. And I finished my 2 rakis and I felt a bit lightheaded, you know, not drunk, but not completely sober. I wouldn't be doing an interview if I'd had 2 rakis, you know. And I got back to my hotel and I went to rebook the ticket, and I could rebook it once at like a low cost. That was the sort of deal I had. And I did it, and then I got the confirmation and I read the confirmation and I was like, oh no. I'd booked for 3 weeks later instead of 3 days later. I put it down completely to the raki that I'd had, but then to change it again, I would have had to have bought a new ticket. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, I guess I have to stay in Tirana. I booked into an Airbnb. I met people, foreign people, local people. I went on hikes. I went for lunch. I went for dinner. I went to Dures. I went to Kruja. And I was like, this place is so cool, you know? And I instantly I connected with people. And even though this place was completely alien to me, I didn't speak a word of the language, you know? New culture, new everything. I felt it was somewhere that I could see myself living. And at the end of those 3 weeks, I had booked myself another ticket back. So I left. I went back to Malta. I got my cats, my 2 cats, and everything I owned. I gave up the lease on my apartment. I packed everything and I returned to Tirana. And that was November 2017.
Well, I feel like there's so many turning points in that story of like anything that could having Raki and then booking the flight wrong. And then, of course, the ear infection, you would have went back. So there's so many turning points that could have taken you away.
I think by the December, I was like, I had to make a decision whether I was going to apply for residence. So I did. And I thought, a year, you know, we'll see how it goes. But I mean, within weeks, I think I knew it was going to be longer than a year, you know. But it was for many reasons. It was, I made friends. I felt welcome. I felt safe as well. This was really important. As a single woman at the time, you know, I felt safe, secure, walking around. No one hassled, no one bothered. I saw people leaving their phones, their bags everywhere. You know, there wasn't a sense of danger or anything, which was quite important to me. And I found it really inspiring from a creative point of view. I opened a blog site, which quickly went viral. I think it was the only source of information on Albania, regularly updated in English at the time. You know, I found very quickly a niche, you know, which was not a niche to exploit, but was a niche that allowed me to express myself and explore and be creative and also bring some enjoyment to other people as well.
Amazing. That's great to hear. And you touched on it a little bit, but what did your friends and family back in the UK actually think about your move to Albania, and how involved have they become in your life here as well?
So when my mum lived in Malta, she now lives opposite me, so about 20 meters that way. She was really interested, happy, because she'd finally get to visit this country she always wanted to visit, you know? She was a bit like, there was a short conversation, is it safe there? And I assured her that it was, and she was fine with that. She visited me, I think, about 5 months after I'd moved there, and she loved it instantly. And even today, she just thinks it's the most amazing place. My friends and family in the UK and in Malta there were varying, like Albania, like some not having a clue where it was, others thinking it was still communist, others thinking it was sort of run over with gangs and I was going to get kidnapped. Is there electric and water there? And people not really knowing. But pretty quickly, I was posting photos and stories, and my blog, I was blogging every day, So very quickly, they began to see the reality of my life there, which was completely different to what they had expected. So, now I have people, my friends, messaging me very often. We're coming to Albania. Where should we go? Where should we stay? Or coming to visit me specifically because they've seen what I post. And then people who've seen what I've posted, and that has inspired them to come. I had colleagues visit Albania because they've followed me on social media. They've seen, me working from the beach in the summer, and they've seen the background. They've just been like, oh. I even had colleagues have their honeymoon in Albania because they'd heard me talk about it so much. So I've kind of become a reference point for people who want to come here, including strangers. I probably get a minimum of 10 messages a day, and this can vary greatly. Sometimes it can be so many I can't even stay on top of them, but a minimum of 10 a day from people around the world asking me information about either coming to live in Albania or coming to visit for a holiday.
So let's move on to the social media and online influence that you've had. You've touched on your blog. But then actually what first inspired you to start posting and documenting life in Albania? And then once again, did you ever expect your content to resonate the way it has with Albanians and the world?
No, so the blog went viral. The first blog I posted went viral, and I was like, is it my mum just pressing refresh? And then it was at the point I was posting an article, and every media in the country was translating it and copying and pasting it, so it really started from here. I then started working for local media, Exit.al, which was an investigative media platform. And that, I quickly became known through there as well, quite controversial for many things because I was calling out corruption and all sorts of things and doing investigations and things. But I started to then develop my social media a bit more. And then it was around, I always had a lot of followers across all the platforms, because there was nobody else really doing my style of things. Like, I don't curate what I do. I see these videos and these blogs about social media content creators who plan everything, and they have like a schedule of what they're going to post about, and everything's perfect. Like, no. Like, I would, even if social media didn't exist, I would be doing what I'm doing, which is going to all these places and exploring. Like, when I make my little videos and things, I haven't planned that. There's no script. Like, I'm walking down the street, or I'm sat at home, or I've just had a conversation with someone, and it's come to me and I film it. It doesn't matter whether I look like rubbish or not, whether I've got makeup on or whether I've just come from TV covered in makeup, it's not curated. Like, this is my life. The things that I say are the things that are going on in here and that make me laugh. Or actually, it was my producer at Euronews. She said to me, you should write some of, put on social media some of your stories, because the way you tell them is hilarious, and she said you get yourself into all sorts of strange situations and things. And I thought, okay, so I did a reel about how I ended up in Albania, the story with the rakia, and it got millions of views in a couple of days, and Rita Ora shared it, and I was like, oh my god, will you do an interview with me? She never replied, but anyway, it went insanely viral. And again, this is not some curated post. I was walking around Tirana, and I was just like, let's try this. blah, blah, blah. And I looked terrible in it, I was like, if I knew it was going to go viral, I might have, made a bit more effort. And then from there, it really took off, and I just share what I honestly think. The things that happen, the people I meet, the conversations I have, the things that I think are quirky or interesting. The same with photos as well, I always have a camera in my bag. When I go out, I take pictures on the street of real people, real places. There's no planning there. I don't monetize the platform, so I don't accept. I get a lot of people saying, will you do a reel about my restaurant? Will you do a reel about here? And I'm like, no, I'll come to your restaurant. And if I like it, I'll make a reel about it. But I'm not going to accept payment to do this, because I don't ever want to take away from the authenticity of, like, this is my life and this is how I experience things. I don't want it to be contrived or me to be driven by money or views or engagement, rather than the reason that I'm doing it, which is just to share, my life.
Yeah, and I genuinely think that's why you have been resonated so well with all of your audience, is that it is just authentic. It is you literally picking up a phone or asking a question at one of the conferences, and it's truly a commemoration to you as a person, because you have a following, you could get all these brand deals and opportunities, but in the long run, I feel like it wouldn't benefit, because then you would just be doing stuff to benefit them and a partnership, and you'd lose that authenticity. And I feel like you show yourself authenticity is number one, and that's what Albanians want, is authenticity.
Even with Euronews, when I film outside of the studio, 90% of the time I film it myself, which my producer doesn't really understand. She's like, but it looks so much better with a professional camera crew, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but if I'm out somewhere and I see someone, I see something, for the camera guy to get out his kit, the equipment, the light, the moment's gone. I've forgotten what interested me in the first place. Yeah, okay, with my camera on my phone, maybe it's not going to be so technically beautiful, but you capture the moment a bit better. When I do have the camera people, they say as well, they like working with me because I do everything in one take. So if my daughter runs into the shot, which has happened many times, or there's a drunk guy in the background, or I trip, or I make a mistake, or we laugh, or I don't cut, I just carry on. Because again, I think this is important. It's more authentic than having everything perfectly polished.
100%. And then in building your audience in an honest and engaging way and sharing it all online, what advice would you give to someone who wants to also document their own journey through a place they fell in love with, or even just Albania itself?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that people shouldn't monetize their following. There's people who do, there are some influencers in Albania who do a good job of combining authenticity with paid promotion, but you can still tell when something is paid. I think if you do want to monetize, the way to do it is to do it naturally, like in a natural way. Like I said earlier, I did a partnership recently with a guy about language lessons. I wanted some help with language, and he said, oh, there was the discussion, do we pay, blah blah blah, and I was like, I don't want to be paid, let's do a few lessons together, and I will mention that I've had lessons with you, but I'm not going to go out of my way and I'm not going to accept money, and I'm not going to make posts that say, I did language lessons with this person and they're the best person to do it with. If something with language comes up in my day-to-day life, then that's the point when you mention it. And I think and this is the only time I've done it, and even then I was a bit like, oh, but I think the way I did it worked well. I think if you're going to do brand partnerships, you have to try and really do it honestly. Don't promote something you don't believe in. Don't promote something just because someone's giving you money. Don't say it's good if it's not. You can turn around and say, actually, I don't really like this. I would rather not review you. Don't just promote things just for the sake of it, because I think, yeah, it's just pure advertising then, and people don't want that. They want the real experience. Like if I go to Shkodra or whatever, I go on booking, I book my hotel, I travel by bus, I decide where I'm going to go. Afterwards, if I like the experience that I've had at that hotel, I'll make a post about it and I'll tag them. But if I don't like it, I'm not going to go out of my way to promote them, and it's not, I book through booking. I don't call them up and say, hey, do you know who I am? Are you going to give me a discount? It doesn't happen like that. I will make the post afterwards. Sometimes they'll then message me and they'll be like, oh my God, well, next time you come, you can stay for, that's really nice of you. But I've chosen to promote them from my own initiative without them even knowing who I am half of the time.
Definitely. And I generally think the way social media and how people have evolved now is that they can see through that paid advertising. They can see, are they doing it because they actually love a product? They've seen what it's about. And as you've said, like, of course you can monetize your platform, but monetize it for the way that feels genuine to yourself, because that's the best way for the partner that you're monetizing as well, for them to get the most authentic people to then get into their product as well.
People are tired of being sold to all the time, it's tiring. If I think I'm being sold to, I tend to scroll or click away. I stayed at a friend's hotel yesterday. My friend has a hotel and we've been friends outside of her work, and I always tag them because, they do well. She does a huge amount of charity work and stuff outside of her work. And you know what? I think they deserve, because I love staying there. It's like a second home. That the service is good, and I believe that the people who own it do really great work behind the scenes as well. So yes, I tag it. They're not paying me, you know. But yeah, I see some paid like posts and things, and I just, not just in Albania but outside as well, and I just cringe, and I'm less, for me anyway, I'm less likely to buy a product if I think I'm being aggressively sold to or like manipulated.
And let's then move on to your journalism and reporting in Albania. Of course, you had your background of studying law in the UK and working in Malta, but you are one of a few foreign journalists reporting deeply on Albanian issues and international outlets like your Euronews. So how did you actually build that trust to cover sensitive local stories?
So I think I'm the only foreign journalist who lives here and is reporting and corresponding, and I'm definitely the only foreign one working in local television as well. So I've made a little niche for myself there. Yeah, I correspond for BBC. I correspond for the Times in the UK, for various other media, whoever calls. When something happens, like when Keir Starmer came last week, my phone didn't stop ringing. I think there was a niche. I'm British. I'm here. I speak the language. I work internationally. I'm known on social media, so they trust me sort of from that. But I think, yeah, it takes time to sort of develop that level of trust, especially with the international media as well. A lot of word of mouth. I've also been on the BBC fighting with them a few times as well. I've had arguments with them where they've tried to push this narrative that Albania is full of criminals, or everyone trying to seek asylum in the UK is a drug dealer or trafficker, which is just simply not true. And I've gone head to head with them quite a few times. Also, there are quite a few times where I've been contacted by media and I've turned down the requests to correspond or to report for them because I feel that the narrative they're trying to portray is dishonest or is not in line with my ethical values. Myself, in terms of reporting locally, I'm a bit conflicted here because there's something that really bothers me about the Albanian mentality, and that is that you tend to trust the word of a foreigner more than one of your own country people. And like,
Very
it
true.
really bothers me. But at the same time, I can't change it. So I'm like, okay, if this is how it's going to be, I'm going to try and use my powers for good as much as possible. I worked in investigative journalism for years and years. My colleague was murdered. I worked in investigative journalism when I came to Albania. It got me into a lot of trouble many times. I had people outside my house. I had police protection at one point. I had death threats. And with a very young child, as she was at the time, I took a decision in conjunction with Exit closing. The two sort of happened at the same time. I took a decision that this was not something I wanted to pursue anymore. Like, I've done my time as an investigative journalist. I suffered a lot. Personally, my family suffered. As I said, my colleague was murdered. I've spent years and years of my life fighting for justice for various causes. There are people in prison at the moment because of work I've done. There are laws in place because of work I've done or been involved with. I've done my bit. And sometimes people say, oh, well, you don't ask the difficult questions anymore. And I'm like, well, what difficult questions have you asked? You're just judging me. I've done my time. I have a young family. It got to a point where I didn't feel safe anymore, where people would shout things in public or blah, blah, blah. And I've taken a decision now that I want to focus on things which are softer. Yes, softer. whether that's through what I do on social media or with Euronews as well. I do ask some difficult questions, but also we're so bombarded in Albania with negativity. If you want to read about crime and corruption, you can do so on every single TV channel and portal in the country. If you want to take a deeper look at some topics and combine what's happening in Albania with an outside perspective, then you can follow me. It's not that I'm like siding with the government, because I'm not, but I want to take a different perspective, because even when you work in investigative journalism for so long and you tackle these hard subjects and you deal with fear and colleagues' death and stuff like that, it takes the toll on you as well. It has an impact on your own well-being. And I felt I was at a time in my life where I want to focus on things in a more constructive way, not shying away from criticism, but being more constructive in my approach. So that's what I'm trying to do now. Be more constructive, be more analytical, go beyond the story a little bit more, and to make media and content which is, and I'm talking about my podcast here, which is not just about getting 50,000, 100,000 views because I've brought people to fight in the studio, but content that will serve as a reference point for people today, tomorrow, next week, next year. I've done interviews with people which I want to be timeless, which I think record a moment in time, a moment in history. I've done interviews that, a year or so later, I've had requests for information or details about it from the Home Office in the UK or academics in the US. Or, it's not just about views and causing a scandal and a drama. I want to make stuff which is important today, tomorrow, and in years to come as well. That's what I hope.
What's one underrepresented story or issue in Albania that you think deserves more attention?
Communism. Because there are still over 6,000 people missing after the end of communism. Like, we don't know where their bodies are. We know they're dead, but we do not. Their families do not know where they are. They don't have a grave. They don't have a memorial. Nothing. And nothing is being done to fix this situation. 6,000, over 6,000 people. Like, this is insane. How can you expect society to move on if there are 6,000 people still missing and there's no investigation? There's not even a memorial for them. We have a Holocaust memorial. We have a memorial to the Turkish coup d'etat. I'm not saying they shouldn't be there, but why do we not have a memorial to 6,000 Albanian people who are missing? This is insane. I made a documentary series, 2019 maybe, where I did 6 episodes of this show on 6 people who are still missing. And my idea was to make a digital memorial to these people, something for the families to have. So I spoke to family members who remembered them. I went to the place where they lived and we talked about their character, their personality, what they were like as a person, not just the gory details of how they went missing, so they have something to remember that person by. I can't do it for 6,000 people. I wish I could. But this is really sad. And I think it's part of a bigger problem, which is Albania has not dealt with its past. And until that past is dealt with, it will continue to scar people. That trauma is passed down through generations. It creates a sense of disconnect with your society, with your culture, with your government, with your people, with everything. It creates bitterness, which is passed down. But I don't see it's ever going to be resolved. I don't see political will there. And even in the last 8 years, what I hear from people is, oh, it was so long, leave it now. It's move on. But you can't put a bandage on a gunshot wound, and I see so many different ways that the problems, the horrors from that era are still present today, like in the way politicians speak to each other, the things that go on in parliament, the way the media attacks each other and that they write about people, the language we use in like the use of the word deputy instead of MP. These little things, they're all left over from the communist era. It's still very much present and it's incredibly damaging. And I don't think people want to talk about it, but it needs to be. I can't do it by myself, but yeah, this is something I feel is really not discussed enough. It's not taught properly in schools. I've already started teaching my daughter about communism and what happened. She knows who Enver Hoxha is. She's been to his house. She knows that he killed people. I made a documentary about Muzina Kokolari. She's watched it like 10 times. And then afterwards, she asked me if we could go take flowers to her grave. So we did, and she knows the story of by heart. You have to teach your kids this stuff. It might be uncomfortable, but you really have to.
And it's not a long time ago. It's pretty recent. It's my parents' generation. Of course, I'm from Skoda, so I heard about all the stories that happened in Skoda. Last year, actually, I was on the Original program, and they took me to a museum in Skoda that I never knew about. The museum about the communism and everything that happened, and even my parents didn't know that museum was there. And it is true that this is a vital part of a turning point in Albania as well, of what happened, why we were so isolated. And it's very underreported now. Of course, I understand the side of we need to try and improve as a society and move on. But as you said, this is still my parents' generation that's still probably passed down to me a little bit other stories of what's happened. And even due to their political views, due to what happened in communism time, for what's happening in Albania now.
Mhm. Like, there's one example, like, from my perspective as an outsider, Albanians don't trust each other. You don't trust each other. You maybe trust your family a little bit, but you do not trust each other. You don't trust the media, government, institutions. You don't trust your friends. You don't trust your colleagues. You don't trust people compared to maybe how I've been brought up. I'm not saying I trust everybody, but I'm not so cynical and I'm not so untrusting of the world around me. But this, I believe, comes a lot from communism. My hairdresser, she told me that after the end of communism, she found out her husband was a spy and had been spying on her friends through her business for the entirety of their marriage. And she had no idea. Can you imagine? And that's not isolated. People were spying within families, neighbors were spying on each other. And that is still felt today, even in the younger generation who were not even born, until the 90s, the 2000s, or whatever. So this is just one little example. And this lack of trust, okay, it's a way of protecting yourself, but it's damaging as well to not, you have to find a balance between trusting and not trusting.
Definitely, because we have to advance as a society. And as you did say, it was that thing of people were so afraid to speak because the walls could hear them, is what they said. Because there was so many spies, there was so many everything during communism times. So they didn't have the trust for each other as Albanians, which it goes back to your point where you said about trust foreign reporters way more than they'll ever trust Albanian reporters. And if we don't fight these cases and understand our history again, how will we advance? We'll go on to, out of all the stories you've covered on the show, what's one that actually really stuck with you or surprised you?
Well, the one that struck me the most was not to do with Albania, it was to do with Kosovo. In November, I went to Jakova, which is one of my favorite places. Um, Wonderful people, wonderful place, nice food, but a very troubled past. And I went there in November, and over the course of 3.5 days, I filmed a documentary where I did it all myself. I interviewed people who had lost family members during massacres in the war. And this was, I mean, you can imagine how intense this was. I went to the homes of people where entire families were wiped out, male line, children. I interviewed people who saw it, who heard it, who heard about it later, but entire families wiped out. And it was just, I mean, there were interviews that I did that I couldn't screen, I couldn't show, because even though people consent to have their interviews, I think I, as a journalist, have a responsibility to protect people's dignity. Because when I switch off the camera and when I go, that's my work done. But these people carry this with them. And when you bring up these emotions and then you walk away, they're the ones that have to deal with putting them back. And I didn't feel that some of it was appropriate to share on TV with an international audience. but I managed to get most of the stories across in a way that I think was dignified and respected there.
We'll move on to the amazing books you've been writing, with your newest book being Inside Albania. How did that come together during a personal time of difficulty that you have spoken about, and what has made this project so meaningful to you?
So I decided to do Inside Albania. I did my first book a year ago. I published it in June 2024. But I have so many photos. I've got over 25,000 photos. And I wanted to make something that was a bit more general, because my first book's quite personal. It's accessible to people who don't know me as well, but I wanted something a bit more general with more of a focus on art, so photography. So I created Inside Albania, and it covers all the areas of Albania and includes a lot of photos and some text. The text, the idea is that it gives you a bit more information about Albania that you would not know unless you live here or you speak Albanian again. So that theme that's in my first book is there as well. And it's accompanied by photos. And the format is, it's landscape, it's bigger. But yeah, see? So it's a larger format, and it comes with, a nice cover and everything. And it's more of an artistic sort of book rather than just a guidebook, more photo intense, and I started it at the I'd started it at the beginning of January. And then at the end of January, I left my full-time job. So I was working with another media in Brussels as well. So I left there because of bullying. Let's call it bullying. Yeah, it was a really bad situation there. So I resigned, which was a huge decision because it was 80% of my income, so panic. But it was the right decision for my well-being to take. So I left there, which was stressful because, forget about the money, but it was a really toxic environment, which I realized afterwards has had a huge impact on my self-esteem, particularly when it came to writing. I'd been mainly editing there, not doing much writing. And then I was like, right, I need to write this book. But the self-confidence issues I had to do with my writing, which came from the bullying in that place, made it very hard for me to write. And I really, really struggled. So I focused instead on taking photos. And then I tried to write the text around the photos. But still, even till the last moment of finishing it, it was really difficult, to get past that barrier. I hope the next books will be easier. Also, before it went to print, when we were still working on some of the last bits of it, I was diagnosed with skin cancer. So I had to have a surgery, and you can imagine, like, mentally what a diagnosis like that does to you. So this was really hard. I had to focus on myself, but also getting the job done as well. And then when it was being due to be printed, I was asked whether we would give some copies to be given as gifts at the EPC summit. And I was like, yes. Yes, what a crazy, because the printer was doing some printing for the summit as well. And they'd had some conversations. Oh, this is a nice book. Can we have some copies? So yeah, my book has been given to every prime minister and delegation leader who attended the summit, which is kind of terrifying, but also I'm so happy that my book is on their desks. And if they have time to read it, that they will see what I've written about Albania with love, and the photos I've taken, which show not just pretty lakes and pretty beaches and bars and things, but really go beneath the surface of the culture and tradition and show the people, and even not the ugly side, but the reality. It's not all just glossy pictures and things, fancy bars and hotels. So I hope that will help spread some love about Albania as well. We've only printed a few copies locally because it's a larger kind of book. It's not the cheapest, but I'll be selling it on Amazon as well. I'm just trying to get it on there at the moment and to get them to print it to the standard that I want. So yeah, this book is literally blood, sweat, tears. I'm still not quite sure how I managed to pull it off in time. And I'm also incredibly grateful that I was able to give those copies to be given to these people. I received some feedback already from people I can't even mention, but I was very surprised even knew I existed. And I'm just happy, you don't make a lot of money from books at all, but I'm happy that I'm spreading the word about Albania. I want to start a project in the summer. I'm already writing the proposal for the next one. I want to do a series of books, one for each municipality in the country. Not as thick as this, maybe 120 pages. But what I've realized from traveling around Albania is every municipality, and even in the municipality, from village to village, there are different cultures, traditions, religion, food, dresses, dialects, clothing, stories. Everything is can be so different from one town, village, municipality to the other. But this is at risk of being lost. Um, Demographic change, modernization, globalization. I mean, everything is changing, and a lot of these things are being lost. Things I've written about in my previous books don't exist today, for example. And I want to create something specific with photos for each municipality, which highlights everything which is truly unique about that place. And I want it to preserve these things through photos and through text. And this is my next plan. And again, this would be sold internationally as well. So watch this space.
Congratulations first. It's amazing and a testament to all of your hard work. And I'm so glad we've been able to give opportunity to you and have all the Prime Ministers see it, because I genuinely do trust it. And I can't wait to get a copy for myself when it does come on Amazon here in the UK, which I was waiting, but not yet.
When I saw it, it's really pretty as well. It's a really nice book. And I worked with such nice designers and an editor. She's Albanian, a young Albanian designer, and an Albanian design company, and they were just amazing to work with. And I'm just really happy it happened.
Amazing. And then regarding the book, among the many regions and stories you've talked about, is there one part of Albania or theme of the book that really stood out to you? I know it's hard for you to pick one.
Okay, I'll be general, and I like the south. It's beautiful. I don't like Saranda. That's one area I don't like. Not I don't like it, but it's not top of my list to go back anytime soon. Berat, Girocastra, they're all beautiful. Bells, this everywhere is wonderful. But if I had to choose, it would be the north of Albania, always, every day. We're talking from like Latch upwards. So Leisure, Shenzhen. I have a small apartment in Shenzhen and I love it there so much. Shkodra, without a doubt, is one of. I mean, what else? What do you want more from the city?
Mekansko drawn to Taneban. That's what the phrase is. I don't know if you've heard of it.
What was it?
Mekansko drawn to Taneban. It's like to do with the city that if you're from Skoda, you can do anything because we have everything.
What more do you want? I mean, you have mountains and you have a lake, and then you have Velapoya and the beach, and then you can go to Kosovo or to Montenegro if you want, and then you have the castles, and then you have like really cool bars and food and art. I mean, what more do you want from somewhere? I struggle to know. It has everything, and the people are really friendly as well. But Leisure, I love Leisure, and the people there are really nice. Tropoia is also one of my most favorite places. I went on holiday twice there last year, and I'm going at the end of June, and I'm super excited. My daughter cries when we leave. Like, that's how much we like this place. I love Cuxi. I'm going there next weekend. It's beautiful, and the people again are super friendly. Bulciza is nice. Peshkopia is nice. I want to go to Puka in a couple of weeks because I haven't been there that much. I've just been briefly. The north, for me, everything's just a little more raw there. Like the culture is a bit more, I'm not going to say developed, but like apparent, special, diverse. The food is better. I prefer the dialects as well. Yeah, and just the diversity of what you can do. Like I said, the south is beautiful as well, but I just like the north of Albania a bit more. I'm sorry.
No problem at all. And then you are now basically a cultural ambassador for Albania. What does that actually truly mean to you?
It's amazing. I mean, but I've always said, I kind of. Okay, so when I do talks about my book, I always get really nervous beforehand. Not because, like, I'm so used to speaking in front of people, but not about myself. Like even this interview, I feel a bit awkward because I'm very much, I want it to be the message rather than me that's saying it. This goes back to that sort of thing about foreigners again. But it's not my book because Alice wrote it. It's my book because read it, look at the pictures, look how beautiful it is, you know? So this cultural ambassador thing, I kind of accept it in a way because, okay, all right, fine. If I'm going to be a cultural ambassador, if people recognize me on the street, I've been recognized in Belgium, in Malta, in the UK by Albanian people, like on public transport and stuff, you know. If this is going to be the case, then I'll lean into it and let's go with it, you know, Alice, whatever. But I wish you listen, people are more interested in the content, the message, the words, the images, the photos, the pictures, you know. This is the most important thing. To me, it's not that I'm trying, that I would get rid of social media tomorrow if I could, but you know, it's not something that I can do. It's not like if I wanted to be famous, there are a million ways I could become famous, like, and monetizing my platform and doing brand deals and makeup tutorials and all that crap. Excuse my language. You know, I can do that, but that's not my aim. That's not my goal. That's not who I want to be. It's about Albania. It's about preserving. It's about promoting. It's about showing the reality as well. And I get the most satisfaction not from getting 50,000 likes on something or shares or blah, blah, blah. The satisfaction I get is when I get a message from someone saying thank you for showing my country positively, or thank you, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten about in my youth, or, you know, someone in the diaspora who's lived 30 years in the US, you know, or that post made me cry because I remembered something my grandma used to do. You know, this is what it's about. This is what makes my day. When I've had an impact, not me, when something I've said or written or photographed has had a positive impact on someone else's life in any way, no matter how small, that is my job well done. That's where I get the satisfaction from. Like I said, I don't monetize. I'm doing like 10 different jobs at the moment to pay my mortgage. I don't get rich from this. It's because I enjoy it.
So I kind of want to touch more on family life. Of course, now you're an Albanian citizen. Your daughter was born in Albania. You have an Albanian husband. So of course you've learned Albanian and now raised your daughter here. How has the language itself shaped your integration and identity?
When I first came here, I obviously didn't speak any Albanian at all. And it wasn't that difficult at first. Okay, people didn't really speak it, but speak English. I know there was a lot of Google Translate going on. But what really stood out to me was how friendly Albanians were and how willing they were to help, even without speaking the same language. You know, it was never an issue. We always found a solution or a workaround to be able to communicate. So this made integration a lot easier than it might be in some countries like France, for example, where they're not so friendly to people who don't speak the language, or the UK even, you know, we're not very friendly to people who don't speak the language. So this was a big benefit when I came. I never had lessons. I had a couple of lessons very recently. I never had any structured lessons or anything. And I have learned from listening, speaking, trying, reading, making mistakes. And sometimes people say to me, oh, you need to learn more quickly, or I thought you'd be better at it by now, or you need to improve. And I'm like, do you know what? Yeah, I do. But I'm also working all the hours God sends, raising my kid, doing my stuff. I don't learn, I have ADHD, so I don't learn in the same way that other people do. I learn much easier from a hands-on sort of approach. I learn by doing. I don't have the focus to sit and study textbooks and things like that. And I'm like, if you knew like all the struggles I've been through over the last 8 years, the fact that I've managed to learn this much, to be able to work on TV in it, to do live, to interview people from Kosovo and understand them. You know, I may not be grammatically perfect, but considering I've never had a lesson, I think that's pretty good going. And yes, it will take me longer to be perfect. It might take forever, in fact, but I've done it a different way. And that's the way that works best for me. And I'm quite proud of that. Also, I understand dialects more than other people as well. I can even switch a few words and speak in, you know, a dialect sometimes if I want to, which someone who's done 5 years of studying, you know, from a book with a teacher, they might be fluent in standard Albanian, but they haven't got a clue what you're saying if you're from Shkodra. You know, so I see that as an advantage. Also, I have been very firm that my daughter must be raised completely bilingual. So we speak English at home. So she learns English from me. But we have Albanian music at home, Albanian TV, but also she does her education only in Albanian. And this will continue. I want her to do all her education in the Albanian language. She is actually ahead of some of her peers in Albanian language. Some of the kids in her class don't even speak Albanian properly or very well at all, unfortunately, because they spend a lot of time with the screen. She's screen free, which is hard, but something I've been very firm on. So yeah, and she actually speaks English with an Albanian accent. So it was very important to me that she learns Albanian properly. It is her language, it's half of her identity and culture. And also, I'm hoping that she'll teach me a bit, as she gets better. She corrects me. She translates for my mum. My mum lives here. She doesn't speak any Albanian. She can translate. She's 5.5, my daughter. My mum saw a car accident a while ago, and not a serious one, but she had to give a statement to the police, and there was no translator available. And my daughter was with her at the time, and my daughter was able to translate for my mum to the police officer enough to give a statement. That's pretty impressive for a 5.5-year-old, I think. So yeah, it's really hard language. It's a beautiful language, but learning it has really opened huge doors to me, especially in terms of my work. When I go out to small villages and I stop people by the side of the road, or I start talking to someone on a bus, or, I talk to everybody, people selling fruit, or, with their cow in the side of the street, or a farmer. I'll go over and ask what they're, if you don't speak the language, you never get to hear these stories. I've met people along the way, like this guy in Javelina, and he was sat outside a coffee shop, very old. And I asked him, "How old are you?" And he said, 90 something. I was like, "What do you mean something?" He was like, "Oh, it's so long ago. I don't remember. I don't have any documents, and I've had all these funny interactions and stories with people that I would never have been able to get if I had a translator with me, because it creates some distance, or if I didn't speak the language. But yeah, to anyone who criticizes or says, "Oh, you should speak better than that by now," you try learning Albanian without a teacher. It's not easy.
Especially as you mentioned, there's so many dialects. Like you can learn Letara or whatever, but then you won't be able to hear someone from Kosovo or Shkoda. And then you go to Shkupe or Ulcin, and then they have a completely different one.
Yeah, like the Macedonian and the Montenegrin dialects. I mean, I've not had enough exposure to them, but like I can tell you, I can normally guess where someone is from if they're from the north of Albania, and I can make a difference between perhaps Dibra and Shkodra, for example, and then Kosovo from their accent. Also with the south, if I don't understand what you're saying because you talk too quickly, I know you're from Vlora, for example. So yeah, these are things. Yes, it will take me longer to be better, but there are people I know who are Albanian who don't understand the Kosovo accent.
Definitely, definitely.
So that's how I see it.
Amazing. And of course, you've spoke about your daughter. So what are some of the biggest differences you've seen raising your daughter in Albania compared to your own upbringing in the UK?
For me, safety and freedom, these are big, big things. So I find Albania incredibly safe. As a woman, as a mother, Albanian people love children. They really love children. This is different to the UK. In the UK, we have a saying, children should be seen and not heard. If you take your kid into a restaurant and they so much as move from their chair, people are like, you might be asked to leave or whatever. Here, kid jumping on the table, smashing plates, and the mother's like, "Get down!" And the owner of the restaurant will be like, "Oh, it's fine. They're so beautiful. I want to eat your arm. I want to eat your cheeks." I'm exaggerating, but it's a different, people are a lot more tolerant with children. But I'll give you an example. In the UK, I was taught from as young as I can even remember, do not accept sweets from strangers. Do not talk to strangers. Do not let a stranger hug you or kiss you. And okay, I've taught my daughter about stranger danger a bit. You don't have to hug anyone you don't want to. You don't have to kiss anyone. If someone makes you feel uncomfortable, say no. But here, she comes, I do her washing, and her pockets are full of sweets and money, and it's different. If I refuse a sweet from an old lady or an old man, it's rude. They would be hurt. They would be upset. They're not trying to groom her. They just love kids, and it's different. Of course, you still have to be careful everywhere. That's what being a parent is. But you have to trust your gut, and it's not that blanket perception of danger that we have in the UK. I go to Tropoia a lot, as I said, in the center of the city. We were there in the summer. There was a festival, a party going on. I didn't know where my daughter was half the time. She was 5, because it's absolutely no one's going to kidnap her. It's not like the UK. It's not like the US. I want to go to the US this year for some things to do with my book. I'm not going to take her with me because she's grown up in a country where she's free, where she can run around, walk around, where she can talk to strangers, where if we go into a shop, I can go that way, she can go that way, and we meet at the end. I can't do that in Manhattan with her. And she's a bit young to understand that difference. Yeah. She knows not everyone is a good person, but she's, like I said, she's been lucky to grow up in a place where children are loved, where children are protected by the community. Of course, there are outlying cases that happen, but I'm talking in general. I walk from my house to kindergarten. The amount of people that stop and say hello to my daughter, like they all know her. On the way back, she gets fruit, she gets, olives and stuff. This is really important to me to be able to raise her in this kind of environment. Also, this access that I'm able to give her to nature very easily, to cultural experiences. I take her with me 90% of the time when I'm filming, when I'm doing trips for research, and she's there next to me and she hears what I hear, she sees what I see, she experiences, she's got a wardrobe full of different traditional costumes, she knows 600-year-old folk songs in Albanian, she's getting a really good form of education about her own country as well, which I don't think is something I'd be able to give her in the UK in the same way. We have a nice culture there, but it's not as rich, I don't think.
No, I don't think it is either. And then I kind of want to go on to your daughter's schooling. Of course, one of the biggest things for Albanian families that have left Albania and not to come back is that children have a better schooling system here in the UK or in the diaspora. I want to know, of course, we spoke about it a little bit, and your mother herself was a teacher in the UK. Can you kind of get into that and how everything about education with your daughter?
So I put my daughter in a private school at first, private kindergarten, and it was very expensive and it was a huge financial burden for me, and it was terrible. It was terrible. They ran it like a business. They weren't interested in the kid themselves. They didn't provide any service to the parents. I was asking questions at the end of the year like, how is her language? She's bilingual, and they were like, we don't give individual feedback. And I'm like, so what am I paying you for? And there was a real problem with bullying, and I mean severe bullying, and there was no willingness to deal with it because the parents have 2 or 3 kids at the school. They don't want to upset the parents who withdraw the child, and therefore, over €1,000 in fees every month. So I put her in state kindergarten. All the kindergartens in Tirana and now in the rest of the country, they've been refurbished after the earthquake. So the conditions have improved significantly. Her kindergarten is a state kindergarten. It's beautiful. The facilities are great. Yeah, they have big classes, but so do they do in the UK as well. And I pay €30 a month. How much do parents pay for preschool care in the UK? I mean, it's unaffordable for most to be able to send your child to a creche or to a kindergarten before they start school. My mum was a teacher for 45 years, primary school. She picks up my daughter quite often from kindergarten. She's really impressed with, obviously she doesn't understand a word of Albanian, but the facilities, she sees the activities they have set up. She sees the art on the walls, what they've been up to. And she was very impressed by it. I took the decision to continue her with state education in September when she starts first grade. I can't afford the other options, and I wouldn't want to send her to an English-speaking school anyway. The private Albanian schools, I'm not that convinced in the quality. So she will go to state school. I've chosen to send her to the artistic school, Jordan Misra, Liceo, where she will learn music as well for a couple of hours every week for free. I mean, I studied piano and violin from the age of 4 in the UK, and I nearly bankrupted my parents. And my mum was a teacher. She took extra lessons, extra classes to cover the costs of my musical education. And I think it's important if a child has an interest in this kind of thing to nurture it. I did from an early age. My parents ended up preventing me from following that path, and I've actually so I wouldn't always wanted to be a journalist and on TV and to be a writer, and they pushed me in the other direction. And I went the other direction, hated it, and now at the age of 38, I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do when I was 5. My daughter is artistic. She likes music. She plays the piano. She likes singing. She likes dancing. She loves painting. You know, of course, the other subjects are important as well, and she will be encouraged with all of those. But I think it's important that we allow children, when they have a natural interest or talent in something, to explore that. And I have the opportunity to do it here as part of the state system, and I will do that. The only limitation is schools finish at 12 o'clock here, so I'll have to pay to send her to an after school club. But that's good in a way as well, because, you know, she'll be doing maths, another language, science, you know, so again, it will balance the academic side of things. Is the education system perfect here? No, it's not. It's underfunded, it's under-resourced, there's problems with corruption in some areas. You know, a school in Scrapar is going to be vastly different from one in Block in Tirana, but I think things are improving. It's not going to happen overnight. And honestly, I would rather send her somewhere and not pay for it, and then have the money to invest in other areas of her education if needs be. Also, something important to me is that she's around normal kids. You know, I don't want her to be in an environment where everyone's rich or privileged or everything. I want her to be around normal kids. This is important. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's not perfect in the UK either. I grew up listening to my mum talking about all the failures of the system there. And class sizes are not that much smaller than they are here. My daughter will be 25, 28 kids in her class. There were 32 in my school in the UK. It really can vary, you know. Yeah, the system there's not good. The schooling system in the UK as a child with ADHD as well, it failed me massively many, many times. You know, I really struggled with school. So yeah, it's not perfect there. When she gets to university age, I would hope that the system here has caught up a little bit, and she will have the opportunities here that she deserves. But for now, this is the decision I've chosen to take for her. And I would advise other parents as well, especially younger years, trust the state system, save that money, and then you have it to invest in other things they might need, other activities, extracurricular lessons, and their future as well.
Also, talking about the music side of it and your daughter, I learned the violin myself, and luckily in my city we had it a bit more subsidised, so I didn't have to bankrupt. But I genuinely do think that Albania, kind of in the UK, is losing that musical sense of learning an instrument, etc. And just from seeing the beauty of what Squadra Electronica did, I was in Basel this week, and how literally everyone, about 50% of people in Basel that were on the tram system, whatever, had an instrument with them. And even when I see it in Albania, they have an instrument with them. And I genuinely think, I feel like the UK is losing that, whether that be because music was more of a hobby, and now social media, not even just social media, just screens themselves are taking away that time that people use for a hobby.
Same here as well. You know, when I tell people where I'm going to send my daughter, and I've done my research, I've spoken to teachers there, I've spoken to people who've sent their kids there, I've spoken to people in institutions and things who are in charge. You know, I've spent a long time researching my choice. And they sort of look down on the school because they teach music. You know, or she's going to be around musicians and arty types. Yeah, thank God, you know. They look down on it a bit, like, oh, a musical instrument. What about the important topics? But this is important.
This is what problem solving, learning a language, learning a beat, even when I was playing in an orchestra, learning from the sounds of other people.
Memory, discipline, attention to detail. These things, having a routine.
Discipline is the biggest thing.
Yeah, discipline, having a routine, making it part of your routine, prioritizing, practicing, studying. I mean, there are so many skills that I learned from music, which I apply to my daily life, you know?
You got diagnosed with skin cancer recently. And of course, one of the other things is a healthcare system in Albania. What kind of journey was that? Of course, it's a big thing to happen with a diagnosis.
Yeah, so I noticed I had something. It was there for around 2 years, but I didn't really think it was anything to worry about. And it changed recently, and it was bleeding. It was here on my head. And I realized that something was wrong. I went to my dermatologist anyway. I went to her for something else, and I said, can you take a look at it? And she did some tests, and there was another doctor that checked, and she said, yes, it's skin cancer. 100%. And she said, you can go to the family doctor and you can have the procedure done. It probably maybe a week for everything to be done. But I would have had to have gone to the family doctor, then got a referral, and then blah, 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 which is fine, you know. or I could have done it privately. And the doctor is someone that I knew anyway. And I'm the type of person, as soon as I knew it was there, I wanted it out immediately. I said to her, "Can you take it out now?" And she was like, "Alice, it's 6 o'clock in the evening." I was like, "Can you just get it out of my head?" And I called the doctor immediately. I was like, "When is the next opportunity you can do this?" Like, and I had it removed the next day. And I didn't sleep in between. The type of person I am, and the feeling that I had when I found out I had it was just get it gone immediately. So I would have happily gone down the route of the family doctor, because a week is pretty good. But yeah, for me, I just wanted it gone as soon as possible. I used the family doctor, I used the healthcare service for various things. My daughter was premature. She had some problems with like chest infections when she was a baby. She was always in state care, and it was always very good. Basic but efficient. I find, if anything, they're almost too cautious. Like they keep them longer than you might have to, because they want to be completely sure they're okay, you know. Of course, there are problems. A friend of mine, her mother died recently because she couldn't get a liver transplant. They don't do it here. So, you know, there are limitations. But I don't think it's correct to write off the whole system. I know many doctors and nurses and specialists who work in state institutions here and in private practice who are intelligent, clever, professional. They don't accept bribes. They care about their patients. They do their best with the facilities that they have to offer the best level of care that they can. If you get really, really sick, or for some more rare conditions, yes, there are limitations, but Albania is still a very much developing country in many ways. There is a lot of work to be done to improve this, but I put my trust in medical professionals here for many things over the years, and I've not had any problems. With the cancer thing, I'm waiting biopsy results and whether I need any further treatment. It doesn't even cross my mind to go elsewhere. You know, I know my doctor, I trust him. I know my dermatologist, I trust her, and I will trust what they tell me. If it's really, really serious, which I don't think it is, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, you know. But for now, everything has been fine in terms of the treatment that I've had.
So moving on to the culture in the diaspora. So many in the diaspora follow you closely. What do you think is the most often misunderstood thing about Albania today? And what would you want them to really know about it?
I think a lot of people who live in the diaspora, not all of them, but a lot, think Albania is still how it was the day they left. They come back on holiday and stuff, you know, and that's fine. But there are a lot who still think it is how it was the day they left. In 8 years, I've seen huge changes in this country. Is it perfect? No. Are there problems with corruption? Yes. Are there problems with public services? Yes. But there's also lots of improvements. And I think this is not always taken into account. There is a lot of opportunity here. You can do things the right way. You don't have to be corrupt anymore. You can do things the right way. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of money to be had. Things have got better. I've actually started getting a lot of messages from people in the diaspora who want to come back to Albania, or maybe they're married to an Albanian person and they want to come back and live here. So this is encouraging. But yeah, I think still a lot of this old mentality of, oh, it's corrupt, people are shooting each other in the streets, it's terrible, the government are awful, blah, 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 blah. The government's not perfect, but things are better than they were 7 or 8 years ago, in my opinion, in my experience, living here day to day, accessing government services, setting up a business, like a company, you know, dealing with the healthcare service, with schools, this sort of thing. I see things better now than they were. I see infrastructure is better. I've noticed many sort of improvements. I think it's also important not to expect Albania to be like the country you're in. Like, you can't expect to be the same as the UK here. Now it's like 34 years since the end of communism, you know, and let's just write off the whole 90s, because that was a disaster anyway. You know, it's less than 34 years. You can't expect it to be on a par in terms of healthcare, education, business opportunity. You know, it takes time for this to develop, you know. I think it's unreasonable to expect things to be the same. And also, you can be a part of bringing that forward. You can come from Canada, from America, from Germany, with your mentality that you've developed there, the way of doing things the right way, with the skills you've learned. Bring that back to Albania, because that's how the society will develop.
That's how change is going to happen.
Change doesn't come just from the top down. Or you can't make journalists responsible for every single thing in society. Oh, well, it's up to you to uncover the truth. No, it's up to you as well. You, from the bottom up, have to demand more, have to have higher standards, and have to be the change that you want to see, you know? And this is especially for the diaspora. Come back from these developed democracies with their perfect systems and zero corruption. Spoiler, there's no such country. But come back and set that bar, you know? This is how things have to be. If you want my money, if you want my business, this is how it has to be. That's how things change. You know, this is the only way that things are going to get better. I remember when I put my daughter in the kindergarten, someone close to me said, it's better if you give the teacher 20 euros a month, you know, just speeding them up. And I said, no, maybe it would. Maybe they treat her better. But I tell you what, if I hear one wrong word against my daughter, I will go to the media, I will go to the police, I will go to the directory, and I will do things the proper way. You know, I'm not going to pay for it. If anything does go wrong, that's when the consequences will come out. You know, yeah. So it's things like this. You have to bring back your experiences, your skills, what you will and won't accept, and change things from the inside out. If we wait around for politicians or the EU ambassador or the ambassador of the UK to change things, it's never going to happen. You know, change starts with us.
Yeah, and that's the power of a diaspora, as you explained, is that we've been growing up in all of these different Western worlds. And there's another question about what is perception. Our parents had perception of Albania being this corrupt thing, everything. All these Western countries they still have to suffer with corruption. So it's about perception, and the only way better things will come is if you focus on the better things, increase your standards, come back from the diaspora, and be the change you want to see at the end of the day. That's all it is. For someone in the diaspora thinking of moving back or spending more time here, like you once did, what is one thing you'd encourage them to do and one thing they should be prepared for?
There's a few things. One, talk to your kids in Albanian. Even if you live in the UK, you have no excuse. Speak Albanian to your kids. It's a gift to give them, the gift of any language, but it's your native language. Speak to your kids in Albanian so when they come back, they can integrate easily if you have kids. Secondly, forget how it was when you left. Forget how it was in the past. Come back with an open mind. Be cautious, be cynical, but not in that Albanian way we talked about before, where you don't trust anyone, you don't trust anything. You know, come back with an open mind, come back positive, come back with your high standards, and try and meet halfway between sort of the Albanian way of doing things and the way that you are accustomed to. I was chatting to this guy who came from the UK a few years ago. He came back here to set up a business, and he was going to get a permit or something, and he was with an Albanian friend. He'd lived in the UK for like 20 years. And the guy was like, you have to buy the director a coffee. You know? And he was like, okay, cool. So he went out, he went to the coffee shop across the road, came back with an espresso in a paper cup and was like, and the guy was like, what the is this? And he said, but you said to buy him a coffee. And he was like, oh, you meant like a coffee? He was like, no. Like, I refuse. Don't fall back into the old way of doing things, you know? Have an open mind. Don't come back with this perception that it's all corrupt, it's all this, it's all that, you know. Come back and change things, be positive. But also, I get messages from people sometimes, and I think they overthink things a bit much, you know. Oh, but what about this and what about that and blah 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 blah. It's your country, just come back, you'll figure out. If I can come here not knowing the language, not knowing anything about it, and have a beautiful successful life with its own challenges, then so can you. This is your country, just do it, just come back. The rest you'll figure out later. But yeah, please teach Albanian to your children, speak Albanian at home. To all of you in the diaspora, I've met so many people, especially in the summer, they come here, their kids don't speak a word of Albanian. There's no excuse. It's not just about preserving your language and your culture. It's a kid learning a second language is great for their development. It makes it easier for them to learn another language as well. If I can raise a kid bilingual in a country that's not my own with zero effort, zero money spent, then so can you. It's the best thing you can do for your kids. So yeah, that's
Definitely. And just the last thing I want to touch on, you spoke a lot about my like parents' generation, the generation of a diaspora that have moved to the UK or moved to all the other countries. But also just I want you to touch on like a generation of mine that are born in these different countries now have heard from what our parents have said, but I don't, even though I go to Albania a lot, I get told I don't know the true what Albania is. What would you tell us in the diaspora that have the ambition to go back and set up businesses, etc., but have never ever lived there? We've lived in these Western countries.
I mean, I think you should try it. You have to come back. I think, but also make a bit of effort to connect with your roots as well. It's maybe a bit easier to. There's plenty of ways you can do through social media, through books, through films, through TV. Your culture is very rich and very diverse and very unique. It's something you should really be proud of, and really understanding what it is to be an Albanian person, the struggles that your country's been through, etc. But also, it's the same as I say to other diaspora people as well. You're born maybe outside of the UK, or you've outside of Albania. You've lived most of your life there. You're at a big advantage because you have been born with that privilege that I have, for example. But you're Albanian, like ethnically, your blood is Albanian. You can't escape that. You are in a great position to go back to your country and to change it as well. So many people have left. The younger generation here is a bit depressing to see sometimes. You guys, I think, are the hope. You're the future of this country. And you guys are super patriotic as well. So I think it's time to put your money where your mouth is, and to come back, or at least to try and split your time, to give something, to Albania, to set up a business and to be more involved with how your country's going to evolve, And let's just look from another perspective. Like I talked earlier, the way that tradition and culture and history is being lost, completely lost. No one's documenting it. Me and a couple of others, maybe. This is really sad as well. We've got to do something about this before it's too late. So the time is now, really. If you want to come back, if you want to contribute, Albania is at a point in its history where it's really opened up to the world. You're only going to get one chance to be at this point in history and to do things the proper way. And that's now. That moment is now, the next couple of years maximum.
Great. Thank you very much. Very inspirational, and what the diaspora needs to hear. So thank you very much, Alice, for being in this podcast. It's been truly a pleasure of this episode with Tea with ALSA. Where can they find you? Where can they get your book, etc.? Please do let us know.
Yes, yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram, Alice in Albania, and TikTok, even though I'm not supposed to use it in Albania. I promise I cross the border every time I upload something. My books, 2 of my books are on Amazon already. Alice in Albania and Tales from North Albania. This book will be there. I just got a message from the designer in the coming days, as soon as possible. It will be on my Instagram once it's live. So yes, please buy it.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Alice. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.